Hello, everybody, and welcome. We're so happy to have you here for the webinar, Understanding the Role of School Psychologists in Supporting School Safety Before, During, and After an Emergency. You have all worked diligently and tirelessly during this past year to rise to the challenges that the COVID-19 pandemic has presented for our nation's education agencies. And we know that much of this work will continue this year as well, as you continually pivot and adjust plans in response to local, state, and national public health requirements. So thank you again for carving out time in your busy schedules to join us today and for your continued dedication to your school communities. Before we get started, we want to share the following tips about interacting with this event. In the web links pod on your screen are relevant web pages. You just click on the name of the web page that you would like to see, click the Browse To button, and then you can take a look at those at your convenience. The Q&A pod is the mode that you can use to communicate directly with us, the webinar presenters. If you experience any technical difficulties during the event, please use that Q&A pod to let us know as well. We also have in the Files pod on your screen relevant handouts that we've uploaded for you. Just click the name on the handout and click the download file button to access that. As a reminder, there is no dial-in for this webinar. Audio is available via the link provided. If you are experiencing difficulty hearing the audio stream, please turn up your computer speaker volume at this time. As I mentioned, the Q&A pod is there for you to send a message to us. Please send us questions at any time during the webinar related to the presentation content or the REMS TA Center in general, and we will answer them as time permits following the presentation. After the live event, please send us any questions to our help desk at info@remstacenter.org. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available in archived form on our website within 7 business days following this event. And now I am happy to introduce our presenters for today. We have with us Madeline Sullivan, Management and Program Analyst at the Office of Safe and Supportive Schools, representing the Department of Education. We also have Benjamin Fernandez, who serves as lead school psychologist in Northern Virginia and is a member of the National Association of School Psychologists School Safety and Crisis Response Committee. He provides leadership and an array of psychological and school-based mental health services, is a crisis team leader and a Prepare Master Trainer, and assists in the coordination of crisis intervention services for his district. He has conducted presentations and contributed to articles related to youth suicide, Prepare, and school safety and crisis intervention. Benjamin was honored by being named School Psychologist of the Year by the Virginia Academy of School Psychologists and NASP. We also have Christina Connolly, who is the Director for Psychological Services with the Montgomery County Public Schools in Rockville, Maryland. She is the former Director for Crisis Intervention and Safety for the Waukegan Public Schools and was responsible for managing the 5 missions of emergency management and safety and security in the school district. Dr. Connolly has authored and co-authored several articles and trainings on school crisis prevention and intervention. She is a member of NASP's School Safety and Crisis Response Committee as well and co-author of the Prepare Workshop 1, Crisis Prevention and Preparedness. She is also the co-author of School Crisis Prevention and Intervention, the Prepare Model book. My name is Bronwyn Roberts. I am not Janelle Hughes. Unfortunately, she is not with us today, but I am the Strategic Director of the REMS TA Center and will be filling in on behalf of her. And we also have Candace Ferguson with us, who is my colleague in Training and Technical Assistance Delivery at the REMS TA Center. Let's look quickly at the agenda for today. We have a full hour ahead of us. And we'll be getting to that hopefully as soon as possible. So I'm not going to go over each of the titles on the screen, but you can see that we are going to be talking about a lot of important topics, all relating to the role of school psychologists in supporting school safety before, during, and after an emergency. The Q&A session is set for the end, followed by some key resources to leave you with to support you in your work moving forward. So first, let's jump into 2 quick poll questions. The first one is about your familiarity with us at the REMS TA Center. Question on the screen, have you heard of the REMS TA Center before today's session? If so, in what context? Did you attend a live training, attend a virtual training, request technical assistance from us, download a resource, met us at a conference, or some other way. Thank you for your responses on that. Okay, great to see. We're happy that you are familiar with us. You can close out that poll, thank you. As you know, the REMTA Center is administered by the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Safe and Supportive Schools. And our goal is to help build the preparedness capacity, including prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery efforts of schools, school districts, and institutions of higher education with their community partners at the local, state, and federal levels. Staff are available via email or phone to respond to your direct requests for technical assistance on a variety of topics, from questions about registering for a webinar or scheduling a training event to topical inquiries about new issues in emergency management. So just remember that we are always here to help you in your school safety needs. Now we'd like to know a little bit about you. What is your role in supporting overall school safety, security, emergency management, and preparedness? Are you a school psychologist? Is your role response-based? Is it school-based? Or is it something different? And it looks like we are very lucky to have a great amount of school psychologists with us today. We're so happy to have you with us. We have some response-based folks as well, administration, that's fantastic. And we have that last category as well. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. With that, I will turn things over to Madeline Sullivan. Madeline?
Thank you, Bronwyn, and welcome everyone. Our nation's schools and school districts are entrusted to provide a safe and healthy learning environment for students, faculty, and staff members, as well as their families. Faced with emergencies ranging from active shooter situations to fires and tornadoes, floods, hurricanes, earthquakes, and pandemics, this is no easy task. And many of these emergencies occur with little to no warning. It's critical for all schools and school districts, public and private, large and small, rural and urban, to collaborate and plan ahead to ensure the safety and well-being of all members of their school community. The National Preparedness System represents an evolution in our nation's collective understanding of preparedness and is based on lessons learned from terrorist attacks, natural disasters, incidents of a variety of different kinds, and experiences working on them. The National Preparedness System describes an organized, whole community approach to national preparedness activities. And its goal, as part of this approach, outlines how the whole community, including schools, can prepare for all types of hazards and threats. The National Preparedness System highlights 5 mission areas: prevention, mitigation, protection, response, and recovery to help achieve the elements of this goal. So when planning, we use the paradigm before, during, and after. And we consider those actions that we can take to help build capacity in each of the 5 mission areas. So for example, we need to be ready to respond and recover. And we need to think about the activities that we can do in all of these mission areas. So in 2013, 6 federal agencies came together and created the Guide for Developing High-Quality School Emergency Operations Plans, or informally known as the School Guide. It aligns and builds upon years of emergency planning by the federal government and was the first joint product of the U.S. Department of Education, Health and Human Services, Homeland Security, Justice, Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Federal Emergency Management Agency, all on this critical topic. In 2019, ED's Office of Safe and Supportive Schools led the collaboration again, and the agencies created the role of districts in developing high-quality school emergency operations plans, a companion guide to the School Guide. We informally refer to this as the District Guide. The District Guide serves as a complement and provides information that can assist school districts in fulfilling both their individual and shared emergency management and preparedness planning responsibilities in the development of a comprehensive all-hazard school EOP. Together and individually, these guidance documents put forth the key concepts, principles, and processes for continually building school safety, security, emergency management, and preparedness while working to protect the whole school community before, during, and after possible emergencies. So schools and their community partners can use the guides to create new plans, as well as revise and update existing plans and align their emergency planning practices with those at the national, state, and local levels. You may access these guides, both the at-a-glance version, or you can download the PDF at the REMS TA Center website. The six-step planning process, which is featured in both the school guide and the district guide, is intended to be cyclical and ongoing. The planning team, identified in step 1, to work through these 6 steps together to create, implement, and continually enhance its school EOP. Schools and districts can use this process to develop the plan, to do a comprehensive review of the existing plan or a portion of the plan, and then they can conduct reviews of their plan's components and parts such as an annex, and all looking at it through that lens of improvement. These steps support a collaborative process which invites multiple perspectives for information gathering, prioritizing, goal setting, and the execution of specific activities in the support of the ongoing maintenance and continual improvement of the plan, including training and exercises for those who support it. So why collaborate? Because planning and the development of a school EOP requires a diverse set of expertise and cannot be done in isolation. It's critical that schools work with the staff within their school building with that insight, including school psychologists, as well as their district staff and community partners, including local emergency management staff, first responders, public and mental health officials, as was demonstrated during the planning process. This collaborative approach will help create an effective school EOP that is supported at the district level and integrated with the district, community, regional, and state plans. This collaboration makes more resources available and also helps to ensure that seamless integration of all plans and all responders. So school safety truly is a shared responsibility. Schools and their community partners all have a role in protecting the whole school community. As school EOPs are developed and continually revised, the planning team can include partners from across the community, as well as education officials from the district and from within the school building, including administrators, school counselors, facilities managers, transportation managers, secretaries, school nutrition staff, and many others, all of whom have expertise contributing to school safety and can support aspects of prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery. This includes school psychologists. Their role and their contributions are invaluable. Whether they are part of the core planning team or ad hoc members, school psychologists are vital members of the team and are invaluable to building safe schools in efforts to enhance school safety, security, emergency management, and preparedness. That is why we are so happy to have our partners from the National Association of School Psychologists, or NASP for short, collaborate with us today in this webinar and to help reinforce the role that school psychologists specifically can play in developing high-quality EOPs and helping to contribute to school safety programs, advocate for the needs and health and well-being of all students, help identify students in need of additional school-based supports, whether it be due to trauma or other adverse childhood experiences, participate in or consult on district and building level emergency management teams, play a role in the incident command system as put forth by the National incident management system, and support recovery efforts. And so now I'd like to welcome Christina Conley and Ben Fernandez.
Good morning, everybody. I'm really excited to be here to speak to you today on the role of school psychologists and school crisis planning. And so we just want to remind especially our school psychologists who are here on the webinar, that providing the support to schools does fall within our NASS practice model as a part of Domain 6 in terms of providing services to support safe and supportive schools, because we know that school psychologists understand the principles and research related to social-emotional well-being, resilience and risk factors in learning, mental and behavioral health, services in schools and community to support the multi-tiered prevention and health promotion, and evidence-based strategies for creating safe and supportive schools. In school psychologists, it is key that we collaborate with others in our schools to help to promote prevention and responsive services that help to enhance learning, mental and behavioral health, psychological and physical safety, and implement effective crisis prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery efforts. And so as we think about the role of school psychologists, we are more than just, some people think like, oh, we're the people that come and do the special ed testing. And that is true, but we are more than that. So because we are trained in providing consultation and collaboration with others, the assessment piece, data collection around this, because with emergency management, there's a lot of data to be collected in terms of trying to ensure that your EOPs are up to date. And so we are especially trained in trying to support schools in that data collection process. The understanding the diversity and learning. Ben later is going to talk about providing support, especially for our students and our staff who have special needs, providing counseling, mental health interventions, prevention and intervention services, because what can we do? That's the first part of the 5 missions in terms of prevention. What can we do to try to prevent as many crises from happening? And then providing that crisis response and recovery efforts as well. Our role fits into each of the 5 missions of emergency management. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Ben.
Great. Thank you, Christina, and welcome everybody. So when it comes to school safety and the role of school psychologists, one of the key things that we have to consider is our role in balancing physical and psychological safety. From my perspective, school safety or comprehensive school safety is an all-hands-on deck process. It's not only involving our physical safety and partners, but it's also including school psychologists, other school mental health staff like school counselors, school social workers, as well as educators and students. So making sure that we have a role in balancing physical and psychological safety is key. And as Christina was talking about, school psychologists bring to the conversation or bring to the planning a lot of expertise. We bring the assessment piece. We bring data collection and understanding how to communicate with data. We bring our expertise with mental health and trauma, with the ultimate goal of pairing up with our physical safety partners to be the other side of the same coin. On the one side, we have physical safety, and the other side is psychological safety, with the same mission of helping to establish an environment where students are safe, as well as believe they're safe, and in a supportive school environment where they can thrive academically, socially, excuse me, behaviorally and emotionally as well. And this balance really starts with relationship and collaboration, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And again, we're bringing all the expertise and experiences from different angles to address that same mission of supporting our school and our school communities. A great example I think of when we talk about including the school psychologist in that balance for school safety is when we think of special needs students. When we coming up with a personal emergency plan for a student, let's say, with autism, We have that physical element of, okay, how are we going to help that student evacuate the building? But we also can bring in to the conversation to make it a well-rounded, comprehensive plan in terms of what are the risk factors and protective factors that the student has that can help with an effective evacuation, which in turn will, one, keep the student physically safe, but two, also help them stay emotionally safe as well. Again, trying to balance the two sides of that same coin. But we certainly cannot do this by ourselves. When it comes to comprehensive safety, collaboration is the key. So it really starts with building those connections and establishing those relationships with our community partners. That could be members from the medical community, law enforcement, community mental health, private providers, and a variety of other groups whose focus and mission is helping to support students and school safety. Excuse me. So it's crucial to start these relationships and building these connections early, and just working to really have a well-rounded plan. As we mentioned earlier, that multidisciplinary perspective and that collaboration is key to have that solid safety plan. And again, that helps with the balancing of both physical and psychological safety. And these relationships should be woven across all mission areas as well. It's not just for us in prevention and recovery, but it should be across all 5 of those mission areas. A great example of collaboration from my perspective was during the pandemic. We were still supporting students and students who sometimes would make threats of self-harm or have suicidal ideation. And because of our relationships that we had established a long time ago, that process of assisting students with those thoughts and feelings and getting that student and those families connected to the right help was much more effective and much more efficient. Again, because of those relationships. We had the relationships with our community health partners. We had those relationships with the law enforcement, as well as private providers. So we had a mechanism and a process to make it very efficient and smooth many times for our families and our students in need. And so I will turn it back over to Christina.
Oh, thank you. And so, all right, so, and as we are providing this support, we have to sit here and we have to consider the needs of our special needs population. And so, and how, looking at this from like the standpoint of, so what do you do before a crisis event happens? So your schools are then doing their drills and exercises, right? So as, let's say you have a special needs classroom with students who have autism. What are the supports that you're going to put in place? What are the things you have to think about before an actual, let's say, like a fire happens? What are the things you need to do in case there's a fire in your school in order to help students who may have autism? Do you need noise-canceling headphones? Do you need other things to be able to help them to get out of the building? And working on special needs plans in my former district and here in Montgomery County, we add them into the IEP. What we do is we talk together as a team before something happens, work with their families in order to see what are the things we need to put in place. These are what we call like personal emergency plans that we review and analyze each year to provide us type of support. During a crisis event, so what are the things that your special needs populations need? Do your schools have Go Kits? And Go Kits are comprised of like book bags with special types of materials in there like a tarp, a flashlight, water, toilet paper, you name it. There's all sorts of materials that you can put into this Go Kit so that you have emergency supplies for your classroom for if you need to leave the building or if you need to stay. So when thinking about special needs populations, so let's say you have a student who's diabetic and you're in a lockdown situation. Lockdowns can last for several hours. So, and they have low blood sugar. So you may think of like, okay, well, I need to put like emergency food in there for the student. or a staff member? What if you have a student who gets really anxious? Do you need to have like a safety teddy bear or something in there that helps to support those who have these types of needs during the event? And then always, after your crisis event, your team should debrief in terms of what are the things that you learned, what went well, what things need to adjust. And then from there, you're going to take that information, and it kind of like reverts back to, then the prevention piece. So if something like this happens again, what do we need to do? How do we need to change and fix our plan in order to provide that kind of support? And so another aspect of looking at responding during emergencies is looking at our trauma-informed practices, right? And so we know many schools are looking at trauma-informed teaching, trauma-informed care, especially now as we are in the midst of this pandemic. And so we understand the trauma that's there from being in this long-term crisis event that kind of keeps on going and doesn't seem to want to end. And so when we think about what are the things we're doing beforehand for the crisis, so what are the trauma-informed teaching practices that we have in our schools? Are we training all of our staff, all staff, not just your teaching staff, but all staff in the schools around how do we support student needs? How do we make sure that our classrooms are set up in a way in order to be supportive and not punitive? And so these are things, again, before the crisis, looking at that prevention piece, what are the things that we can do to try to mitigate trauma that may have had the students, and then also try to prevent trauma from occurring. During an emergency, what are we doing in terms of having that established safe and supportive learning environment? And do we make sure in our schools that all of our students have a trusted adult that they can go to? I mean, literally, I work with a middle school here in Montgomery County, and they ensure that all students have a mentor that's assigned to them. And they work with all staff in the school, not just certified staff, but all staff, so that students have this one person that they can go to. And during advisory, they work together. So what are we doing in order to cultivate those types of relationships so that when a crisis does happen, they know that they can have somebody they can go and talk to? And then after a crisis event, are we providing that individual and group counseling to students who have support? And even some more specific ones in terms of like CBETS, looking at cognitive behavioral interventions for trauma in schools, that specialized type of training for those in order to mitigate the potential impact of post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. And so another special aspect of crisis response is looking at what are we doing around both suicide and behavior threat assessments. And again, these are all pieces that can be part of your EOP. This is an area that can be included under the public, medical, and mental health annex. And so what are we doing ahead of time in order to prevent a suicide, a death by suicide, or a potential homicide to occur within our schools? So beforehand, how are we providing both suicide and bullying prevention and also sexual harassment training and reporting? Like, what are the things that we're doing in order to try to prevent these types of situations from occurring? Do we have a suicide prevention program in place? And here in Montgomery County, we use the Signs of Suicide Prevention Program. Do we have a bullying prevention program in place? And there are a lot of different ones that are out there for schools to use. Because we know that bullying has an impact on both those who want to do harm to others and also potentially those who may want to do harm to themselves. So what are we doing in looking at that dynamic? Because we know that bullying is a form of abuse. And so what can we do to try to prevent that? And then also looking at sexual harassment training and reporting. What are we doing at all ages in order to make sure that our students and our staff know if somebody is harassing you, how do you report that? Because unfortunately we've seen, especially in the behavior threat assessment field, too many situations of individuals who I like somebody, that person doesn't like me, I keep harassing them, I keep stalking them, and then since they're not interested in me, then I feel like I got to kill them. And so what are we doing to try to teach our students, number one, that if somebody doesn't like you, there are plenty of fish in the sea, go out and find somebody else. Number two, that if this happens, how do you report it? What do you do? And also making sure we're teaching coping skills to all of our students, which can start as early as like even in preschool. Hey, if somebody doesn't want to interact with you, hey, this is how you go find a new friend. This is how you cope with that, in managing these things. And so that sexual harassment training and reporting is key in our schools for all grade levels in a developmentally appropriate fashion. If, let's say, you do have a situation where somebody is suicidal or homicidal, what are your assessment and reporting processes? How do you conduct those assessments? Who are conducting them? School psychologists are trained in how to conduct suicide and working with schools on behavior threat assessment processes. And then what are your procedures in your district for hospitalization, for case management procedures? Because if they are hospitalized, usually they'll stay maybe a day, maybe up to 3 days. They're coming back. So what are we doing in order to manage that case management piece? Because the schools are still going to have to provide support for the student over the long term. And let's say in the unfortunate event that you do have an individual who either dies by suicide or somebody who is killed, what are the post-vention efforts that you're doing within your schools to provide this kind of support? As we're looking at that, making sure that the crisis teams, your incident command system, your ICS teams in your schools, school psychologists play a role in those teams. And that there is where you would go, provide support. You may be part of, like, let's say under like the operations section of the ICS, you can develop what's called like a mental health strike team, where that team of mental health providers, including like school psychologists, school counselors, school social workers, or other mental health individuals who work in the schools, going out and providing that support to those classrooms, to the staff that are there after an unfortunate event like this. I'm going to turn it back over to Ben.
All right. Thank you, Christina. And, this slide here has some annexes that school psychologists can be involved in. And, some of them obviously can be a little more obvious in terms of their role, but looking at, for example, within the mitigation and response, there's the accounting for all persons, communication and warning, evacuation, shelter-in-place, lockdown, and so on. Again, going back to school safety is an all-hands-on-deck thing. School psychologists can clearly play a role, for example, in communications and warning, helping to craft messages, helping to make sure that the entire school community is able to understand the messages is very important. So collaborating again with your public information officer, as well as our physical safety partners to craft a solid message going out. It can be one of the roles as a school psychologist. Reunification is vitally important, making sure that our families once they're connected with their child, have the resources and the information on how to help address any of the psychological or trauma needs that their student may have experienced based on the crisis. And again, there are many different types of crises or incidents that schools will experience. It's not always going to be a school shooter type of incident, but being aware of how the school psychologist can address the psychological needs as well as the trauma needs across a variety of situations can help inform their role in a variety of annexes. And I think it's very important to recognize that the prevention and protection annex missions will definitely inform the missions of mitigation and response and recovery in the terms of the role of not only the psychologist but other people involved. Because ultimately we want to make sure that what we're doing in the prevention piece is helping to address needs all the way up to the recovery piece. For what we do in prevention, if we're establishing resiliency, is going to help the students and the school community's overall recovery. And that's, looking at the recovery mission, looking at the annex of recovery and continuity of operations, there's going to be a lot of work that school psychologists can do there. Obviously, the mental health supports, the mental health crisis response and recovery is going to be important, not just during the crisis and as it's ending, but we have to think of long term. Just because the crisis in a sense is over doesn't mean the long-term effects, the mental health effects are over as well. We have to consider sometimes months later, sometimes years later. And how are we as school psychologists and school mental health professionals going to address those needs within the recovery annex? And now, with this pandemic, looking at continuity of operations, not only did we have to transition our academic pieces from the brick and mortar in person to sometimes the virtual, but now we're transitioning back. And so how are we not only going to do our academic pieces, but how are we going to provide the mental health support services? Because this time it was a pandemic. We needed to shift gears quickly, but next time it could be something else. Parts of our country right now are going through natural disasters, and how are we as school psychologists, school mental health professionals, helping to provide the mental health services as well as educational services and to our students and families. So these are things that we continually have to consider and think about our role, especially in comprehensive school safety as well as the mission areas. So the slide here is talking about physical safety and crime prevention through environmental design, and how that is that one half of the coin that I talked about earlier. But as we've been talking about through the last few slides, that other half of the coin, that psychological safety, is crucially important. And again, I mentioned how things are all tied together, and I think that starts with the foundation of school connectedness. Having students, educators, and staff feel connected provides that foundation to that psychological safety, which is paired up with our physical safety. Again, when students feel and staff feel connected, they're able to thrive. And once they're able to thrive, they're able to learn and behave and connect with others. But another part of that, as we build on that connectedness, we're really focusing on how are we going to strengthen our students? How are we going to establish that resiliency? And a lot of that is through a variety of programs we provide as school mental health staff. Social emotional learning is a key approach to providing this kind of learning for our students. We really are focusing on teaching them about the strengths that they have to make it through a variety of situations. It's also teaching them a variety of coping skills and strategies that they can use to address a variety of situations, as well as problem solving. If we can establish those and teach these ahead of time, ideally when a crisis occurs, they're going to have more resources themselves to address some of the crisis-generated challenges that they'll be confronted with. And so that is part of our role as school psychologists, not only teaching that, but establishing goals to say, are our students learning these strategies, and how do we know that? So we're taking a gauge on what they're learning and how they're developing. The other thing we want to make sure we're doing is making sure we're identifying those students and families who may need supports. There are a variety of mental health screenings that are able to be conducted within schools to identify those students in need, and again, plug them into the right supports, whether it's some supports that we provide within the school, whether it's individual counseling or some group counseling, or some outside supports that we have to connect them to, like psychotherapeutic treatments that we can work with our partners outside to make sure our students and families are being connected. And then there's a variety of prevention programs that we're involved in, whether, for example, suicide prevention. That is one of the programs that we obviously need to be promoting in our schools and making sure that our students, teachers, and families understand what those risk factors, what those warning signs are, and obviously what to do if they themselves or a friend is struggling, or if a teacher recognize the need, as well as what a family needs to do if they recognize a need of that magnitude with their students. So we want to make sure, those are promoted and taught within our schools, and that's one of many different prevention programs. And again, connected with that program, as Christina talked about earlier, are the processes and mechanisms to make sure those students are being evaluated and getting connected to the right services, as well as, you know, when they come back to school, how are we promoting their return to learn from, you know, the challenges they experience. So these are the elements of psychological safety. There's so many other components to it, but these are all a lot of the things that we're as school psychologists as well as school mental health staff are involved in to help have a well-rounded approach to school safety. And again, that's the other side of that school safety coin, the physical safety and the psychological safety. So I'm going to move it back to Christina.
Thank you, Ben. And so one of the questions comes up, you know, and I get this a lot from school psychologists and others in terms of, so how do we provide this type of support in schools? You know, like we're busy, we got these caseloads, like how you're asking me to do, you know, more stuff. And so when we think about advocacy, there's a lot of places in our roles for us to go and try to provide the support, try to be the change that is needed within our schools. And, you know, I talk to folks, you know, when I do trainings, I talk to folks around my crisis journey in this work started with a fire in my elementary school. I was a first-year school psychologist, been in there for about a month. It's September, and all of a sudden there's a fire in my school. And so, and from there, you know, I took that as, because, you know, like there wasn't a crisis team. Their crisis plans were over a decade old. Like what's happening from that point, I used that as an opportunity for us to really, as a school district, start to look at what are the things that need to be changed. How old is our crisis plan or EOP? Do we have support for mental health that we can provide? Do we do training for folks on this? And all these questions started growing and then snowballing and all this stuff. And so for me, what I did was I had my principal who came and who helped me to kind of get word out to the superintendent and to others saying that, hey, well, you know, this happened and I saw we did all this and this worked really well, but why is that we don't do this as a system? And then they started to look at it. Then the director over special ed was like, oh, you're right, we need these things. And so finding those allies to help. And then I had others in the district office who were also very interested in doing this work, and that helped me in order to make some changes. And so for those of you out there looking like, you know, find that person, find that ally that can, if you see there's a need for change, that can help you with this. And because you need a team. It has to be a multidisciplinary process, because just sitting there doing it on your own, like it's a lot. You're not, so if you're thinking like, oh my goodness, I can't do all this like by myself, you're right. You need others to come help. And I was able to find other folks who worked in the district who were equally as interested in this work as me to come in, be thought partners, and help me to get these things in place until it got to the point where the district decided to make a position for me that I did only this. But the first few years, it was me as a school psychologist doing this type of work. And also being persistent. I can't tell you how many times people have told me no to something, and then eventually they get to yes. It's some things that taken years. I remember I wanted a tip line for people to promote, like if they're getting bullied or other things are going on in schools, and the associate superintendent was like, no, I don't want to do that. It took a couple of years, but eventually I was persistent, and he eventually said yes. And so, you know, some things, if you feel like it's really, really important for you, you got to look for those opportunities, being persistent. But then also, sometimes I was talking with a former colleague yesterday, and she called me because she needed help with developing her ICS team and the EOP in her district. And was like, well, we had all these great things before. Why is that they don't have this here? And I was like, well, just keep in mind that, yes, you know, when we were in Waukegan, we had great things, but it took us years to do it. And the things that we tried to move really quickly sometimes end up failing. And what we learned is that slower is faster. And that take your time, do it right, get support, work on your multidisciplinary team, get the support of others in order to help move your initiative forward, instead of thinking, I got to do this all at once. No. So slower at times definitely can be faster, because you're going to meet resistance if you go too fast and you start changing things. If you're like, if people don't like change, And so if you kind of slowly work it in there, then eventually you'll be able to get to your goal. So it's okay to take your time, do it right. But then also we have to sit there and think and consider, as we are developing our EOP or revising it and working with others, who are all of our stakeholders? And so for me, I think of this almost from like a social justice stance in terms of how are we providing needs for all of our students? And how are we providing needs for all of our staff, our community? Like, who are those who you may not normally hear from? Because we all know schools have those voices that are particularly loud. It's a small group. And because they're loud, you know, our higher level administrators, boards of ed, so forth, they hear them. But what about the voices they don't hear? So how are we making sure we're getting that? How are you getting student voice data into your district decision making? Are you talking with students, and not just only the students in like student leadership groups like your SGA, those who you know who speak out regularly? What about those students who you don't hear from as much? What do they think? What do they have to say? And so when you're looking and you're working on the revision of your plan or your EOP, look at the room. Who is in the room? Who is not in the room? And so we have to make sure when we think about multidisciplinary, because I know a lot of times when working in our schools, I work with my school psychologist, and I'm like, hey, we got to get you in the room. You know, it's kind of like Hamilton. You want to be in the room where it happens. And so, like, those times when they're making these decisions, how do we get into the room? How do we make sure that those who don't normally speak up have a voice there? And we had to think about this, you know, before crisis happens, during, and even afterwards, because a lot of folks in our schools have opinions around what happened, and that we want to make sure, are we meeting their needs? And so what are we doing to try to reach out to those who don't normally speak up in order to hear what their voice is, to hear the voices of our students, even at young age elementary school, because all students have the potential of becoming leaders and being able to give input when these things happen. So we just have to make sure that we're considering everyone that's around us as we're developing our EOPs, conducting our drills, and responding to emergencies that we're, again, my old superintendent here talks about all means all, and so we're talking about everyone, all stakeholders within our schools. How are we getting that information from them? Right, and I think I am turning this back over again.
Yes, you are. Thank you so much, Christina and Ben. That was fantastic. We really appreciate you sharing all of that. I loved hearing about those guiding questions, especially in particular, as you just said, including the student voice and the voiceless during EOP development itself. And so now we're going to talk a little bit more about that aspect. So as we talked about in Madeline's section, the district and school guides present a traditional format that can be tailored to meet individual school needs as they work to develop and revise EOPs. This isn't a required format, it's just one possible format, and it's typically organized into this basic plan section, which is the overview of the school's approach to emergency operations, the functional annexes section, which has goals, objectives, and courses of action for essential functions, and then the threat and hazard-specific annexes section, which has the goals, objectives, and courses of action that relate to a specific type of threat or hazard. Next slide. The functional annexes focus on common critical operational functions used during emergencies and the courses of action used to carry them out and achieve the goals and objectives. So schools will develop their threat and hazard-specific annexes based on the prioritized list of hazards determined in the assessment process. As planning teams develop courses of action for threats and hazards, they should consider the federal, state, and local regulations or mandates that often apply to specific hazards. So next slide, please. Just looking more specifically at one of these, the recovery annex. As Ben and Christina shared, school psychologists can provide great insight that can enhance planning around the before, during, and after phases of a variety of threat and hazard types. And the same applies to functional annexes. This recovery annex is just one of the many functional annexes a school psychologist could help inform. This annex plans the courses of action that the school will implement to recover from an emergency and includes details on 4 fundamental types of recovery: academic, physical, fiscal, and psychological and emotional. So school psychologists can play a key role in the psychological and emotional recovery of school communities. For example, during and after an emergency event, school psychologists can deliver psychological first aid. They can coordinate other community organizations and partners that can work with students, staff, and families to address their immediate, short-term, and long-term mental health needs. And at an appropriate time, they can even help to plan and conduct memorial services and ongoing remembrance activities. Next slide. The most comprehensive and effective school EOP is developed by a multidisciplinary planning team. So in step one, schools are to identify a core planning team that will collaborate to analyze and prioritize the threats and hazards facing the school and use its collective expertise to inform the development, implementation, and refinement of the school EOP. That multidisciplinary team really helps to add breadth, depth, and scope to the plan with their expertise. It also helps to ensure that all aspects of safety and security are considered from multiple professional perspectives, among other things. And school psychologists, as part of that team, can help to do things such as provide training to school personnel on stabilization and grounding techniques, model a controlled response, and mitigate the psychological impact of emergencies before they occur. Another example is during the recovery phase, they can help share information, intervention strategies, and talking points with parents, instructional and non-instructional school staff, and local community organizations such as youth programs, public libraries, and the media. Who is on the team is so important, next slide please, because these individuals will have the significant role of understanding the situation, which is step two. In other words, these persons will uniquely identify what are the hazards and threats in the school community and subsequently prioritize and address the issues the school faces as a result. School psychologists may provide integral expertise and support in multiple types of assessments that are prioritized during step two. For example, in culture and climate assessments, school psychologists may examine the current social, emotional, and behavioral supports available to students on school grounds, gather information about incidences of bullying, violence, and other problem behaviors occurring at the school to inform the assessment, and support comprehensive analysis of school engagement and the school social emotional environment. The expertise of school psychologists is equally important during the threat assessment process. Within the threat assessment team, school psychologists may help identify troubling or threatening behaviors, parenting issues or relationship problems, and identify individuals who may pose a threat and those who may become victims. And with that, I'll turn it over to Candace.
Thanks, Bronwyn. So let's talk for a moment about threats and hazards. In the context of school safety planning, they're referenced into these four categories: natural, technological, biological hazards, and then adversarial and human-caused threats. Sample threats and hazards are listed according to those categories on the screen, so this is not an exhaustive list. School psychologists are important contributors to understanding and assessing the situation. Looking at this sample list of hazards and threats, it's hard to imagine one that would not require the involvement and expertise of the school psychologist, whether to support prevention, protection, mitigation, response, or recovery. Next slide, please. Assessments help the planning team to customize the EOP. The planning team may use numerous assessments, including site assessments, climate assessments, behavioral threat assessments, and capacity assessments. In the case of climate assessment, as we know, in a nurturing, inclusive environment, members of a school community are more likely to succeed, feel safe, and report threats. If a student survey is used to assess culture and climate, student privacy must be protected. A range of personnel in the school can assist in the assessment of climate, including, of course, school psychologists, who may help inform the development of questions featured in the climate assessment based on their unique qualifications and knowledge of mental health and behavior supports, as well as based on lessons learned from experiences interacting with students and families. Next slide. The planning team decides which of the threats and hazards identified in step 2 will be addressed in the school EOP. So step 3 involves developing goals and objectives for each. A school will have multiple goals and numerous objectives supporting each goal. And this is an area when collaboration with the school psychologist can help, since they often contribute to this effort. For example, school psychologists can be part of the goals before, during, and after an emergency. If, for example, during, they can screen,
and treat students, staff members with psychological first aid in the event of a potentially traumatic event, and contact additional medical and mental health professionals and or the school and community support personnel as needed. Next slide, please. The goal of step 4 is to assign action for accomplishing planning objectives. Courses of action address the who, what, and how for achieving the goals and objectives. The planning team develops courses of action and subsequently related protocols and procedures to support the step 3 efforts, those goals and objectives, and of course the courses of action to form the annexes, providing actions to take place to promote school safety before, during, and after possible emergencies. The courses of actions will get very detailed and specific to each school building. For example, courses of action might provide details such as assigning responsibilities and timelines for the following broad activities that school psychologists can assist with: holding training sessions on topics such as psychological first aid, child development, social emotional learning, prevention, resilience, and wellness. And they can also help collect student and school-level data and evaluate programming to monitor effectiveness, revising plans as needed to support students and the school community. Next slide, please. In step 5, the planning team develops a draft of the school EOP using the courses of action developed in step 4. As part of a review process, health professionals that have a set of roles and responsibilities in the plan, those on the core team or those who are on the ad hoc team, and school administrators should be involved in approving and modifying the plan. Remember that planners have to be careful not to share every part of the plan. The planning team needs to determine what should and should not be shared and with who and whom. School psychologists can work to ensure that schools abide by both FERPA and HIPAA to protect student and staff privacy by only disclosing information to the necessary parties. Next slide, please. Now that the plan is written and approved, it must be implemented, practiced, reviewed, and enhanced. In other words, the whole school community needs training and opportunities for practice and the courses of action to be tested. School psychologists should play a key role in exercises and efforts to practice the plan and to refine it, including, as Ben and Christina shared earlier, the development of an after-action report and updating training annexes, policies, and procedures from lessons learned. Next slide, please. Now that we've completed a walkthrough of how school psychologists can help support each step in the 6-step planning process, and you heard from Ben and Christina how school psychologists can help reinforce the role throughout and their role in each of the 5 preparedness mission areas. Next slide, please. So we only have about a minute or so to go through a few questions, and I know that you all have been very active in submitting questions into the chat box, and we will certainly get to your questions afterwards. I did want to pose a question, though, real quickly to Ben and Christina. Does the school psychologist have a responsibility to assist families after the emergencies occur?
Absolutely. I think school psychologists, in their role of providing mental health supports, and as Christina said earlier, we're not just the people that test. We're trained in so many more things. But the mental health experience and expertise that we bring, particularly when it comes to crisis intervention services, is vitally important because, a crisis will occur, we'll triage the situation and assess for the impact, and then deliver appropriate intervention at the time. But again, as I mentioned earlier, crises don't end once the crisis teams leave. Recovery can take a long time, so being available to provide those supports to students and families is going to be important to help with overall recovery. And again, we can bring a lot of people to bear to help support that recovery with our relationships with other school mental health providers, our community partners. There's a lot of things that we can do to help address those needs for students and families.
Thank you so much, Ben.
And I'm not going to say anything else because Ben covered it all.
Thank you, Christina. As mentioned, we received so many wonderful questions, and so we will be posting, along with the materials and the resources, after the event, we'll certainly get to your questions as well. And I just wanted to wrap up by giving everybody who joined us today a big thank you, especially to all of our guests and our participants and partners from the Department of Ed and from NASP, of course. It's so great to have you here today to share this information and really to discuss the important topic of the role of school psychologists in supporting before, during, and after an emergency. So we do have some resources displayed on the screen right now, and these are REMS resources that we thought you might find helpful following this meeting. And we've also saved them in the files so that you can download them. And again, they'll also be available after the archived webinar. We provided resources as well from the Department of Ed. This new resource is from the Department of Ed called the Return to School Roadmap and will also be included in the archived materials. And then finally, we want to give a big thank you to both Ben and Christina from NASP who provided 2 pages of resources for you. And again, these are located in the files section. These are free resources that they compiled and provided for each of you. And as always, we want you to know that the REMS TA Center staff are available via email or phone to respond to your direct requests for technical assistance on a variety of topics, from questions about registering for a webinar or scheduling a training event to topical inquiries about new issues in emergency management. Please just remember that we're always here to help you in your school safety needs. We thank you so much for staying engaged, for your thoughtful contributions, and mostly for what you do to keep staff, students, and families safe every day. Please do not hesitate to reach out if we can be of help in any way. Thank you so much, and take care.